This week, we'd like you to meet the Cyber Mercenary who can overthrow a government, as we are joined by Chris Rock from SIEMonster. In the security news, fried squid is tasty, but the squid proxy is vulnerable. Flipper Zero and other tools can now Bluetooth low-energy spam more than just Apple devices. Cisco iOS vulnerability in the web interface, again. Is Signal vulnerable? WinRAR being exploited still. Math.random is not really all that random. Get your malware samples and my inside look into Android TV devices, malware, and the horrors of the supply chain. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Coming to you in super low definition compliments of Darth Vader himself. This is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 803, being recorded on October 18th, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Remotely, Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
What's going on? Good to see you, buddy.
Yes, good to see you. Mr. Josh Morpett is here with us. Josh, welcome.
Hey, what's going on, brother?
I can't see you, Josh. I don't know where you went. I don't have you on one of my screens, but I can hear you. That's important. Oh, there you are. There's Josh.
Okay. I exist. I swear. I'm here.
What's up, man? Miss Mandy Logan is here with us. Mandy, welcome.
Good evening, everybody. And Paul is going to tell you here, I have vodka and papaya juice, but I'm using the correct dirtiness of glass. It's only 4.4% dirty, unlike your 20.7% or whatever.
Yeah, I think 20.7 sounds about right in terms of dirtiness of the glass that I prefer. That's good. That's good. I'm proud. You're working your way up to the 20.4%.
Oh no, I'm at the right place.
So yours is the foot. You like 4% dirtiness. At what point does dirty become filthy, Mandy? Is it half? Half? At the halfway point of dirtiness?
Absolutely. If you were beyond 44.5,
you're filthy.
Everything possibly around here, yeah, that's filthy. That is an abomination. I mean, well, after 80 is definitely an abomination.
Mr. Aaron Leland is here with us.
I can't stop laughing. I absolutely love that word filthy. But I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, right.
But just very quickly, I want to thank you, Paul, and all the other hosts on the call tonight, and everybody else at Security Weekly that supported my post on LinkedIn this week, searching for a new job. Very, very kind words. Thank you. But yeah, none of them were filthy.
Thankfully,
I can edit my post.
That's right. If that's a challenge you're throwing down, Mr. Sam Bound is also here with us. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Are you sure about that? I don't know. I think I got everyone. Make sure you join our Discord channel. You can chat with us, host, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more by visiting securityweekly.com/Discord to receive an invite. Also, you can visit my website, securitypodcaster.com, find links to the podcast I host, some book recommendations, my ridiculous PC build specs, and a whole lot more at securitypodcaster.com. Chris Rock is a cyber mercenary who has worked in the Middle East, U.S., and Asia for the last 30 years, working for both government and private organizations. He is the Chief Information Security Officer and co-founder of SIEMonster. Chris has presented 3 times at the largest hacking conference in the world, DEFCON, in Las Vegas, on controversial vulnerabilities, including how hackers could create fake people and kill them using vulnerabilities in the birth and death registration systems around the world. Chris, welcome to Paul's Security Weekly.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's nice to have you, man. Hey, I want to get started by asking you how you got your start in information security.
I'm 50 years old now, so I was born at the right time. So I've been in IT for, since I was 13, probably before that. But, when I finished school, it was straight into IT. So IT first, 10 years, and then security after that. So even security wasn't even really a job when I started IT. So just a perfect personality for computers and security.
So when you started in IT, it was very similar probably when I started. So it was like IBM PCs. Gateway was still selling PCs back then. You had Windows and OS2 Warp, right?
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. VAX and the mainframes and all that sort of stuff as well.
That's awesome.
Dial-up modems and all that sort of fun. Dot matrix printers and ASCII porn and all that sort of stuff.
That's rounding out the older technologies. I love it. Well, where'd you start working after like the early days of computing, as we get into the 2000s, let's say?
Yeah, 2000 banks. I did 10 years in the banking sector, so I worked at from my accent, Australian accent. So 10 years at 4 different banks in Australia.
Chris, what is a cyber mercenary?
It's a keyboard for hire. So you know what a mercenary is? Someone who's essentially been in the army and then leaves and then does private jobs. PMCs. I do the same thing, but for companies and governments, do computer related tasks instead of firing a rocket launcher sort of tasks.
Gotcha. So when did your work take you into like the Middle East and things like that? What projects brought you to those different areas of the world?
Yeah, I was doing a penetration test in the Middle East, and then I got a tap on the shoulder to say, are you interested in doing some work for a Kuwaiti company? And it started from there. So it was like, I know a guy that knows a guy. And then that sort of reputation spread, and my career in the sort of cyber mercenary then took off after I did a lot of work in the Middle East, like pen testing, and then into cyber mercs type stuff.
Yeah, and so when you say cyber mercenary and it says in your bio like overthrowing governments, how does it escalate from IT worker to pen tester to overthrowing governments?
It might be like we've got suspicions that an employee in a subsidiary is doing XYZ. Can you validate for us without tripping any alarms? So I will essentially hack into the person within that company, and both personally and company wise. In the Middle East, it's different ball of fish over there. So hack in, have a look at money transfers, evidence, all that sort of stuff, then report back on what's going on, so they can move forward.
How do you get on a pen test, like you get a permission slip, right, Chris, to do work that's targeted at that company. When you're targeting an individual, as you described, how do you get around like the permission aspects of that?
You need to think differently. That stuff doesn't exist over there. So the whole pen test, here's the scope, blah, 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 stick between these rules. If you do one IP out, we're going to sue you. It doesn't exist over there. So especially when I was doing that sort of work, you just have it's Wild West over there. So you can do whatever the hell you like.
I gotcha. Go ahead, Tom.
What do you see today's kind of, we won't call it cyber mercenary landscape, and as you start to talk about doing that, when we get into it from the United States or someone working from the United States, how do you see that kind of evolving and people getting interested in and or looking at it from the scope of like, would this fall within inside of something as a company that we could use or a government or working group? Like, where do you draw those lines for going after ransomware, for actors, individuals working and living in other places? Like, my risk tolerance obviously is much higher than most people, and my gray lines are a little bit different than everybody because everybody has different gray lines. But from your standpoint, what does that look like to you from an ethics standpoint for both attackers and or actors that need to be dealt with, and the pointy end of the spear that really should be dealt with by people like you?
Are you asking me personally what I think for myself, or for what the general people are?
I think a little bit of both. I'd like to see what you think, and then I would like to see what you think the general consensus is for everybody else's risk tolerance and where we should be getting to.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the reason I asked is I don't have any ethics, qualms, morals around that whole topic. So for me, it's just a job. It may be illegal to do what I'm doing in one country, but not another. But at the end of the day, I look at the job that I've been asked to do and then validate whether it suits mine my set of ethics, morals, whatever you want to call it, and then I then act or not act based on what I'm requested to do. On the general consensus, obviously there needs to be certain rules, or it's just mayhem. You use the word cyber mercenary, you can use the word cyber criminal. They can be interchanged depending, you're working for a company or not. It's really blurred lines. You're doing a coup in Equatorial Guinea like Simon Mann did, and I did work with him in 2016. Yes, it's illegal. Paid for by the British government. Everything crosses the line. It's just what you're comfortable with.
Cybercrime in one country, right, is patriotism in another. So there's that.
Exactly. Exactly right.
No,
exactly.
I love it. There's not many people that are comfortable and or openly discuss these type of topics, and there are many people like us that sit at the pointy end of the spear and have to do things that are uncomfortable for everybody else. So when you get someone that discusses it openly and freely and has no qualms about any of that, obviously there are always ethics discussions as we bring the next generation in. But from the standpoint of what you do and or just jobs that need to be done in general, really there's a wide open breadth, but that requires some very broad understanding of geopolitics, your morals and comfort level, and understanding who you work for and what you're doing actually.
That's a beautiful statement. I couldn't have said it better myself. The thing is, I'm trying to come out in the industry to say that there is people like me. That a lot of people hide that because they think it's going to hurt them professionally. You talk about, the black hat reformed hacker, now white hack. And in some people that's true, but a lot of it is bullshit. And a lot of people say they're white hat, but they do both. I'm just trying to say that it's okay to be on white hat or black hat. There is a need, and I'll give you an example. I do jobs, for example, like a US or Australian citizen is in jail overseas and needs feminine hygiene products. I'm being tasked to make payments to a guard in, say, Libya, for example, to make in Bitcoin to make sure that person gets paid, so that person gets again, female hygiene products. So, it's illegal to pay bribes, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you've got a citizen of a country that needs something, is not going to get it. And that's just the way it works over there. And I'm glad there's people like me that can do that task and will carry that baton on.
Oh, that's awesome. What are some of the OPSEC and understandings that, again, this stuff isn't always talked about unless you're, in any of those places that are doing this type of work or working groups or have experience messing this up. Like, what are some of the OPSECs that you consider and some of the things that people just really should realize they can't go and entirely just jump into something like this? They really need to understand the risks personally, the risks digitally, the understanding of how and what players do with inside the game. And then overall, like, what are ways that you can talk about this and get understanding and information around those type of things?
Again, another great question. So for example, if you're asked to do a job, for example, you need to see what the big picture is. And I'll give you an example. If I'm doing a job, there may be other people looking at that target at the same time as me. So I may be on a compromised server that have 5 different hacking groups on it. It's not like we're the only one. I'm not saying that organization paid multiple people to look at that same institution, but there can be government 3-letter words, 4-letter words, whatever, also doing their work. So you've just got to, work around that area and just have a look at what the big picture is at play. So, you talk about OPSEC and stuff like that. It's just having a look at the big picture and be careful what you do.
You mean deconfliction's a thing, or maybe should be a thing in some places that are sensitive?
Yes.
Chris, do you physically go to these countries, or is this remote or a mixture of both?
Mixture of both. I do both. I prefer not to go to the Middle East, but just climate-wise, look at my skin. I get burnt. Get moon burned. But I got to do both.
What security precautions do you take when you're physically on location doing this kind of work?
It's probably the normal thing that most of your listeners do. You don't bring your phone. You bring a burner. You bring a laptop that you can you buy from a computer shop that you just chuck out when you finish. There's no, I'm going to use Teams or email or Gmail or any of that sort of bullshit. You essentially set up fresh everything and dump it when you leave.
Mm. No, that's really interesting. So tell us about the coup with Simon Mann. Can you tell us that whole story?
I can't tell you the whole story, but I can tell you parts of the story. I was tasked to look at the look at the country of Kuwait and look for its exposure points, and then work out where it was sensitive. And because I've worked in banks and telcos my whole life, it was really easy for me because I know the power of a telco. Like, you may be a bank, or you may be 100 banks. At the end of the day, you're sitting on, in a US, you're sitting on AT&T, you're sitting on Comcast, you're sitting on one of them. And then if you can dump the telco, you can dump everything. So I've focused my attack on telco, and you probably would have seen that in some of the snippets of the video. I also work with Simon Mann because he does the military side. Not that we were doing the military side, but just to see the way he thinks. Like when he when he got caught in Equatorial Guinea, is like how he thinks, which is different to what a pen tester thinks or a cyber merc. What's the first thing that he looks after? And so I used to try to put that mentality into the work that we did in Kuwait.
I got you. You said he was captured in New Guinea?
Equatorial Guinea, yes. He did a coup for the Margaret Thatcher's son, and he got caught. I think he did 6 years in jail for that one.
Wow. Is that
he's now public speaker.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
So those who don't know him, he's ex-SAS, British, and then he moved into the mercenary field after that.
Mm-hmm. Is that a common path into the mercenary field?
For sure. I mean, he's got the training. I mean, you've got an SAS soldier who's got communications, coordination, project management. Where can I get bombs from? I mean, there's even he's written a book called Cry Havoc where he actually has to buy bombs from Russia and get them shipped to use in his coup. So he's a man that, you give him a budget and he can do what you need to do. And he's got some great stories, where he might be tasked to protect a mine. So in Papua New Guinea, which is just north of Australia, he was asked to protect a copper mine. And because he's a mercenary, it's quite funny what he did. He essentially was offered, I think, $12 million to protect this copper mine, and he used that $12 million to actually buy stock in the copper mine on the Sydney ASX stock exchange, and then double up. So essentially protect and own the company all at the same time. So, and the Australian government actually saw what he was doing and blocked it. But it's that sort of mentality that really interests me. I mean, that's disobey written all over it.
Right. You presented on creating fake people and kill them using vulnerabilities in birth and death registration systems around the world. How does that work? Give us an overview of that, Chris.
Yeah, so I'll give you how I found out about that. I was just watching TV and on the news, and then a hospital in Melbourne said that 200 patients that were supposed to be discharged were declared dead. And I thought, what's going on? Like, how could that possibly happen? So that then led me down the rabbit warren of when you die, what happens? So I then researched the doctor side and the funeral director side and the government registration side. So essentially, in the US, when you die, a doctor fills out half a form, like what you died of, and then they will put their registration number and all that sort of stuff. They'll hand that over to the funeral director, and the funeral director will fill out the other half of the form, where they're buried, all that sort of stuff, next of kin, all that sort of stuff. That gets submitted to the government, and then boom, you've got a stamp, you're dead. The government wanted that online because you would have local registries in, let's say you've got like a remote area of the US, and they would have like a council office where these death registrations are recorded. These would burn down, they would flood, these files would get missing. So they wanted a centralized online system. Now, doctors are awesome at what they do, but they're pretty stupid when it comes to IT. So they put it online. And what they needed from the doctor was essentially your registration number, your office address, and your phone number. Now, the problem with that was anyone can find out an office address of a doctor and a registration number, because if you want to go see a doctor, there's a huge ass database to say whether you're a doctor or not. So you can verify that your doctor is actually a doctor. So you could fill that online section yourself as just a normal user, and I could fill that section in as a doctor. Same thing as a funeral director. It was essentially a funeral director number, address, and that was the two parts of the process to kill somebody, also to birth somebody as well. So you could birth somebody, kill somebody, and then collect the insurance of a non-existent person, and there's no next of kin.
And this was shown in the two hacker movies that come to mind, both the Net and Hackers. Was it really online back in the 90s?
No, it's probably around about 2014, 15, which is when I stumbled onto it.
Okay.
And it's not the government's fault. Essentially they're trying to get things online, trying to make it easy as possible, but in doing so, that just left a beautiful hole for me to come in.
And so how would you use this ability to, like, on paper, birth someone and kill someone?
It's awesome. I could essentially birth 1,000 people and then wait till they're 18. And all of a sudden, I build up credit records on all these people, and then I start causing havoc on stock markets, getting loans that never get paid off, bankrupt these people, kill them off, get insurance money, sell cars that don't exist, and there's just no. You're just not going to get caught. You know what I mean? Like, it's just you've got bank accounts, you've got 1,000 bank. I'm using the word 1,000 just because I don't want to say a million, but you could cause absolute havoc. And this is not just an American problem; it's a worldwide problem. So it could be done everywhere. It's absolute chaos what could be done for a criminal that could do this sort of thing.
You say could be done, but I imagine that people have taken advantage of this fraud in the past. No.
Yeah. After my talk I did at DEFCON, people contact me and said, this is exactly what happened to me. Mm-hmm. Not the online system, the paper system. So they did the whole old school fraudulently fill out the form. Right. So I'd have people contact with me. They couldn't, trying to get their lives back. They'd try to get a credit, and then, all the money would go. They'd loans in their names and all that sort of stuff.
So it also intermingles with people who are already alive and haven't been fake birthed or fake killed.
Correct. I mean, for example, you could, kill your ex-wife, for example, just as vengeance. Shut down all their bank accounts, steal all their money, and just, be an asshole.
Or the FBI agent that's investigating you for hacker crimes.
Like exactly. Slow them down a little bit.
Oh, that's great.
So I am curious from your standpoint, from the cyber mercenary standpoint, and like you do this for a living, right? Like what is your balance, and or how do you get involved or see things like cyber hacktivism, and or when wars kick off, the balance between job opportunity and or the ethical right thing to hop on and help and maybe deconflict and work with, say, three-letter agencies or parties that are otherwise unnamed? What is kind of your roles in each of those positions, and where you kind of fit in as those play out?
Look, I'm motivated by. I presented the research at DEFCON because I love doing research, so that's what I presented. In your specific question, I'm not a hacktivist, as in. I know this probably sounds really shallow. I don't believe in enough to fight for something. So, but I know that some people do. Whether it be Palestinians now or Save the Whales or stuff like that. If they're doing what I do and their motivation is hacktivism, who am I to say that's a bad idea? Like, if that's their motivation, knock yourself out. You know what I mean? It's just, if you're going to go down that path, just know what the fuck you're doing. It's like, don't see something on the news and start doing a ping of death to a website. Like, if you're doing a ping of death to a website or trying to deface a website, like, just fucking go watch TV. Like, you're not ready for that world yet. You know what I mean? Like, you are not ready. If you're trained and you know what you're doing and you want to disrupt, then knock yourself out. But if you're just a kid, when I say kid, I mean that with respect. You're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and you don't really know the ins and outs of how stuff works, then just leave it the hell alone. Leave it to the professionals.
Would you say you're a capitalist at heart? That's your motivation?
No, yeah, definitely. So I say capitalist, but I don't want to sound shallow, as in finance is the only goal, because I love research, and there's there is money in research, but what I do, I present because I could see a real big problem that's going to affect society. So the answer to your question, yes, I'm capital focused, and that's the mercenary mindset. But also, I also have those, ethics to know that if there's a woman that needs help and in a prison as a US or Aussie citizen, then I'll reach out because that's something that I can do. So I suppose that's the activism component. It comes back to, essentially how were you raised or that, whether you want to participate or not.
I love it. Thanks.
So, Chris, you get involved with, you kind of mentioned that there was like a hostage situation where you helped out. And is that common situations for you to help out with, where someone is being detained in another country?
It's not common. I've done it twice in my career, but it's easy for me to tell that story than there was an individual that stole money from another company, and then we had to rob the bank and move the money back to the original company. That's more palatable to an American audience than go into detail. So I used that example. But to answer your question, it's not common, but it has happened.
Right. But it's more so to, in your case of the bank account, in terms of theft, right? You're helping recover people who've been robbed, essentially.
Correct.
Or so working in a political climate as well, like you talked about working in Beirut. That was for a political means to evaluate the security of other countries, right?
Exactly, and that was Kuwait.
Kuwait, right. Yeah. It also says here that how mercenaries can bypass modern day jammers. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I did a talk at DEFCON last year. DEFCON. What was it, 30? I think it was. Yeah, DEFCON 30. Where I was, all these ideas just come to me, so it's not like I just go out and research a certain topic, but Julian Assange was in the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK, and all these comms were getting jammed. And so I was interested to find out how jammers work. So, essentially, for those listeners out there, jammers jam frequencies, so you can't communicate it out, which then led me down the path of IEDs. How do IEDs get, triggered? And there's obviously different ways to trigger. You can, physically trigger, via wire, but then there's remote control. There's also chemical as well. I won't go into that. You can see all those details in my talk. So I looked at how you could circumvent a jammer using the radio frequency spectrum. And I found out that jammers don't operate below that 18 kilohertz. Well, essentially, they don't operate below 20 megahertz. So I couldn't quite understand technically why jammers won't operate below that, unless it's specialist jammers. And that led me down the garden path of things like frequencies and wavelengths and size of antennas and stuff like that. So I worked out a way of creating a 9 kilohertz and below wavelength using the Earth as an antenna to create those wavelengths to detonate an IED from distance of about 9 kilometers, or between 9 and 12 kilometers, or 7 or so miles.
And so even though those frequencies were being jammed, you could still transmit to the target device.
Correct. So because the jammers only don't operate under 12 megahertz, and I'm in the kilohertz frequency, they couldn't be jammed. Not only that, I was in near field, so I wasn't in far field. So when you use your garage door opener and you hit the button and the garage door goes up and down, when you hit the button on your remote control, that wavelength, and there's probably some hardware people listening, there's a near field. You guys use near field all the time when you use your phone to pay for stuff or tap and go. There's a time, we've been told in our whole careers that near field's great for communications from 1 to 5 centimeters, and you don't question that. If you sit your CISP, it's 1 to 5 centimeters, and that's by design. Like it doesn't go that because of antenna size and power and all that sort of stuff. So I've essentially created a near field wave, not far field, near field, as in right close to the source, so it can't be jammed. The jammer would have to be in the near field range to jam. And if you have a jammer in 9 kilohertz, you're looking at a antenna that's sitting, 10 plus kilometers into the sky, which is obviously not feasible on an IED or jamming an IED.
I gotcha. Yeah, a lot of the jamming stuff, Chris, like people don't talk about, publicize, and they try and hide it. And I've never been a big fan of just like obscuring facts to prevent people from doing bad things. I think it should all be out there in the open. Flipper Zero is one example of that, where they're like, oh no, you can't do this with it because that's bad, but the radio can. And then if you hack the software and be like, oh, we're not supposed to talk about that. Like, why can't we just talk about?
FCC has big antennas that they think are sticks somehow, and I don't know why everyone's so scared of the antennas that are based in the ground somewhere.
I'd like it if you could explain that using the Earth as an antenna trick. If you're running at 9 kilohertz, the wavelength is like 30 kilometers, right? So your antenna would.
Yeah. So what happens, and again, you can have a look at the talk on DEFCON, and I've also written a 200-page paper. But for the listeners there, I essentially put 2 metal rods into the ground, 1 meter deep into the Earth, with connecting wire, and then I transfer a frequency, and that creates a magnetic field, and that magnetic field it essentially allows me to communicate. We did computer simulation first, and then we did field testing, which were quite accurate. But what we didn't allow for things like bits of steel in the ground would disrupt our communication or make it even better. So, for example, if I was trying to blow up a train from a distance, that railway track on the surface actually does me a service. So instead of that whole 9 kilometre or 7 mile, I can actually do 20 kilometres. But if you're in the middle of the desert, and soil conditions and impedance and all that sort of stuff, and that's in the paper, by the way, you can actually see how far you can communicate. And in some soils, you can only communicate up to 1 kilometre. So you've really got to look at what the soil type that you're using. I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And go to the question before. Oh, sorry. The question before that. The question before that was a statement around, everyone hides information, and that's the biggest problem there is, because the whole world is don't look behind the curtains, and all it takes is someone to look behind the curtains and go, well, you said this was secure. Like that whole body camera stuff that was demonstrated at DEFCON 31 about, the police body cams, you could send signals to the body cam. If that had been made public, security researchers would have found that in 5 seconds, but then it gets presented live in front of a DEFCON audience. So I'm a big fan of making it open and making it secure. Even there's a little bit of I'm going to use the word embarrassment for a better word at the start. At least down the track, you don't have criminals using this to their advantage.
Yeah, I agree. I think the information, it wants to be free, and it should be free and open so that we can all evaluate the risk and help mitigate the damages, right? And if we don't know it's there, people trying to hide it, then it's just people who have taken the time to uncover it, maybe haven't talked about it, that could profit from that in some way, right?
Oh, exactly. I'd rather
offer a counterpoint, and I'd like to see what your thought is on the counterpoint of that side as well. Like, as much as I do agree with this, and been doing this for a long time too, old hacker, want information out there, but looking at the current threat landscape, and we see a lot of the ransomware actors and skiddies and kids out here that have freely available access to things they don't understand that otherwise they would not have the skill to create, and or they don't do their research or time to get to the point where they understand and build these things. So we build them for them and they just use them and take advantage at the criminal level. I am at the point where I'm now starting to question. I keep most of my TTPs that are really dangerous in-house, and some of them, unless it is benefiting the greater good of the world, I like those things to be maintained in smaller working groups of trust groups and or with inside open source communities that it can get shared out. That's fine. It can get leaked, but at the end of the day, the ease of use for things like OST tools that provide. And again, I'm an OST guy. I'm on the offensive side. I love that shit being shared, but now we're giving people the ability to do that very easily that otherwise shouldn't have the ability to do that because they're not smart enough to do that. So kind of what is the double-edged take on how information is one thing because you can use it, learn it, and then build yourself, but we're providing it ready-made nukes to everybody, and all they have to do is push a big red button, and they're dumb enough to push them.
Was that directed at me?
Yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, coming from the old school side, and or both of us in the kind of offensive sick.
So your view is sound, and it's a great view, and I think it's a great view from yourself. I'm the opposite, but I'm not saying yours is wrong. I just, for me, mine has always been freedom of information, disobey. If shit goes wrong, then that's the world. We don't blame the exploit that's trigger ready to go. We blame the original hole in the software, not the tool. But my view may be wrong for your audience and yourself, but doesn't mean it's it's two different views.
No,
but I respect that.
I completely agree, and I came from that side like up until very, very recently. I 100% agree with that view. I'm just now trying to understand like where the freedom of information to freedom of dumbasses using my information to piggyback on to do stupid shit that they don't understand.
So and look, you're free to do what you want, as long as you don't smack somebody in the nose. Okay, and I'll shut up and let Mandy, who's been aching to talk for a while, talk.
Oh yeah, I have all kinds of questions. But on this, like Tyler, it sounds like you're struggling against that force of conscience. Like, think about the people who created the first steam-powered, what became an automobile. Well, of course, people were going to piggyback on what had already been done, and that led to the creation of tanks and all kinds of other problems. But I think what you're saying sounds like you are understanding the magnitude of what is going on, and yet you're also not in a position to be able to stem the tide of what people will do and what they will take advantage of.
I mean, I really don't care. People have choices, and at the end of the day, like from an ethics standpoint, like, all right, great. I love that freedom's out there. I love we poke and break stuff. Like, things should be broken, and if you create dumb shit, like it should be broken, and we should be continually breaking and making sure that the world's safer and breaking stuff to prove points and continually push technology. But at the same time, there's people that are dumb that don't spend the time and just use easy things, the easy button to make money and lots of money. Well, many of us spend lifetimes releasing research that took a lot of brain power and a lot of hard lessons learned, and then people just go make money on it and don't even know what they did.
And don't attribute and don't give you any money and don't and are basically they're rude.
Contributes to the greater world problem that I'm then having to try and fix and or deal with after that.
You know,
on that note, I'm going to shut up and listen.
No, it's an interesting one. I mean, you
it's a great view. You're going straight to heaven, mate. You know what I mean? I listen to what you say, and you sound 100% logical, and I have to agree with you. But again, if I'm a criminal and I'm using your tool, I don't give a fuck who wrote the tool. I'm after money, and I'm not going to give you a slice. I've got to share my exploit with my 4 teammates that I've been doing this exploit on. So you've got your mindset is right, and mine is probably wrong. But I don't care. You know what I mean? I've no interest in sharing shit with yourself. But I respect your view.
Well, I had a question for Chris, going back to when you're talking about ethics. And I'm curious if there's been an event that you could discuss that actually modified your own morals and ethics in some profound way, not just because you were having to adjust to the particulars of an engagement, but that actually made you internally go, oh, wow, I'm going to think about this completely differently.
It's another great question, and I keep saying great question, but you guys are asking really good questions. So for me, it was I've been a black hat and a white hat my whole life. It's just one of those things. I always hide the black hat. I work in banks. You can't say that stuff. So to the community, I'm a white hat hacker. But one day I was getting into meditation, and when I say I was meditating regularly on a basis, and it was like, one of the key questions is, who are you? And, the first thing when I say the first thing, after 2 years of saying who you are, the first thing that came back to me, like my soul, what resonates to me is you're a fucking hacker. Like, you are a fucking hacker. There's no other thing. You're a fucking hacker. Act like a hacker, So for me, that awakening then led me to, hey, I'm white and black. I don't have to hide shit. This is who I am. And so that enlightenment was almost like I'd come out of the closet. Like, for me, it was the best thing I'd ever done, is to admit that I'm both and not struggle with both those. So in terms of my ethics and morals, I was raised well. You know what I mean? I was raised well. It's just, this is how I turned out, and this is how I function. And I don't try and hide that, what I do.
Wow. So you're saying,
Chris, hold on, like, Chris, that's really deep, and I never quite thought of it this way on that many levels. The difference between, we'll just use the terms white hat and black hat hacker. If you're a black hat hacker, I think people assume that it's not just that you're willing to break the law. It's not that you could lack morals and ethics, but it also could be that you don't care if you harm people, and we lump all those things into black hat. But when I hear you talk, Chris, I don't think you're the kind of person that wants to harm someone else, right? So when you say I've done some black hat stuff, I just want to clarify that there's a lot that goes into that, and you don't strike me as someone that wants to harm another human being.
No, I'd rather be a Marine and know that someone has done research onto this whole IED stuff than me being 25 foot in the air with my ass on fire and no one's done any research and hidden it. You know what I mean? I don't want that to happen. Hence why I published that. Anything I published, I want people to know, because it's not supposed to be in my little tool bag. And look, I'm no fucking genius. There'll be other people that will find that shit too. So it's best if that sort of stuff that I think is like real damaging, just shit to get out there so they can fix it.
It's like the anarchist cookbook was back in the day, right? It was, we can't. You're not supposed to have that book because you could do bad things with it. I'm like, well, anyone can do bad things with anything, really. Why shouldn't we all know what the bad things are so we can help protect people?
Well, it's like that Jordan Peterson moniker, right? Like you have to be a beast. You have to be an absolute beast in order to understand who you are, and then if you have that and you understand that that's what you are, then you have the ability to make the decision to control or not to control. If you don't understand you are that thing, then you just are what it is, and you come out as whatever it controls you as, rather than harnessing and being able to use that. I love it.
Well, true, because you can't enforce your full power if you don't understand your dark side as well. And Chris, I was thinking, I appreciate your comment and all about meditation and the mindful and almost spiritual aspect of understanding who and what you were, and then why and what you were going forward, and why it aligns to your precise, almost mission on the world, where for somebody else it might be absolutely horrifyingly detrimental. And a complete, again, I'm going to go back to the word abomination from earlier. Not filthy, but an abomination that they are carrying it out, because I'd say when I went through that same process that you were describing, like for me, what it came down to in one main nutshell is that I am trauma. I am trauma, whether that is, it's not that I am seeking out to inflict that, but there are sometimes certain scenarios that for other people they would be incapable of creating the right blend of trauma that needs to be done in order to effect the right change. On the other side, I've also, encompassed that I have endured so much trauma that I have the strength and capacity to maintain it still with love and care, and wanting to use technology in the most intellectual way and in the highest reasoning, like the third level of ethical development. And that is incredibly fascinating, because to me, it makes me think of when you were 13, 14, 20, and you were understanding and growing through what you were doing in IT. And I would imagine for a lot of our listeners, you're still always progressing toward, well, wow, how can I use all these tools to the best good that will make me the most powerful person I can be? And it's cool. I'm glad to hear all of this from you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well said. And for the young people out there, don't let your conscious thoughts fuck everything up. So just keep moving forward. And what I mean by that is, you might read stuff and you might be on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you're essentially wasting your time doing that sort of stuff. Just relax. Your career will present itself to you when you're ready to listen to it. So it will come to you. So I know that people are saying, I want to get into pen testing, I want to get into forensics. How do I go from 18-year-old just done boot camp to forensics? It will present itself. There is no rush. I've been in this industry 30 plus years. I wasn't in security at 18. You have to work your way through it. And you don't want to be going forward too fast either. At the same token, if you go forward too fast, you then suffer from things like imposter syndrome, like, oh my God, they're talking about something that I don't even know about. I don't deserve to be here. There's no rush. You're allowed to be a noob for 10 years until you're ready to go forward.
That's great advice. Aaron, you had a question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Chris, why does one pivot to SIEMonster? Is it getting harder to be a mercenary? Are you worried about paying with your freedom? And the big question at the end, also as you are the CISO, do you think hackers or governments will come for you for at very least beating Chris Rock?
You're only allowed one question, mate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, one question at a time. I meant to coach. I meant to coach Aaron on one question at a time. One question at a time. But you get excited.
One filthy question.
Yeah, you get excited.
One filthy
question.
For 5 minutes, and there's not even a question.
Sorry, mate. Sorry. We'll do a part. We'll do a part
Chris.
2.
It's like it should be me and you against the Americans.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I agree. Look, I'll answer the first one, and then you'll have to help me with the second, third, and fourth. But the first one was, we were doing penetration testing for a company, and they wanted a SIEM solution. And we quoted them Splunk. Like, we went out and got a quote for Splunk. It was $1 million for looking after their 10,000 seat. Now, they didn't have they didn't have $1 million to afford Splunk. So they actually asked us to write a SIEM platform. We're pen testers. We've got no interest in writing SIEM, but we thought, you know what? If they're going to sponsor us to write a open source SIEM platform, we will do that. And we built a open source SIEM platform called SIEMonster. That's the journey. When we released it, we had over 100,000 downloads in under 9 months. And we thought, what the frick's going on? Why is SIEM so popular? So my penetration testing white or hat side of the business dumped that completely and went into the SIEM space for the white hat presentable CISO guy, if that makes sense. So that's why we designed SIEMonster.
Okay, I'll just ask the last part of the question because the other part doesn't matter too much. But as you're Chris Rock and you're known at DEFCON, you're really well known in the community, you're the CISO of this company, do you think people are going to try and attack you to make a name, attack the company to make a name?
Short answer, yes. The perfect target, prison yard, go for the biggest guy, bang. It's the same in cybersecurity. I get probed all the time. I'm going to get done over. Like, you're going to get done over. I might have 1,000 different accounts around the world that I've had over 30 years, old Gmail address, old Yahoo, old, Delta Airlines account. You're going to get done. You just limit your, we talked about risk before, or one of you mentioned risk. You just minimize your risk. You don't have the same password for all accounts and all that sort of stuff. So to answer your question, yes, and just limit your risk.
That's, Chris, you remember kind of a scary point for those of us that have been in it 20 years plus, right? You've accumulated so many accounts. Sitting down to clean those up is like, it would be time consuming and tedious, but also something that we're like, I want to work on the next shiny thing, or do I want to go clean up, some of the stuff that might be hanging out there? And I'm not saying we ignore OPSEC entirely. That's not the case, but like, how much do you put into, OPSEC and specifically cleaning up like a whole bunch of crap from 20 years ago?
And that's the point. So, I might have an old PlayStation account and, should I clean that up? Answer is yes. It probably doesn't even have 2FA on it. I probably should clean that up. But what's the risk? Credit card expired from 2005. Who gives a shit? For me, risk low. Who cares? I change credit cards every year because every time my kid uses my credit card, without me knowing, I just cancel, get a new one. That's just how it works for those who've got kids. So.
Yep. I've been there, done that.
Keep moving.
Been there, done that. Live to tell.
I saw a donation. I saw a donation on my credit card. I go, I don't donate to anything. How could that possibly be? Cancel, get a new card. What are my kids? Wikipedia or whatever.
Yep. So in your background image, Chris, there's it's an image of a vehicle exploding, and so your research that had to do with the Earth, using the Earth as the antenna to trigger in IED, that's the result of that research behind you?
Yes. So, for the viewers who can see that in my DEFCON talk, but yeah, we drove 4 remote control cars over an explosive pad and then detonated that remote control car from obviously a safe distance, and then recorded that. We had to do it at 1,000 frames per second using a $100,000 camera to capture it because it's pretty quick. But yeah, we drove it over a pad and then we used the jammer, or not used the jammer. Sorry, we used the IED device, my device, to see if we could bypass the jammer, and that was one of the successful shots there.
So many logistics questions, right? It just plagues my brain. Doesn't matter who I'm interviewing, of logistics questions of how, right? It might be some of the hacker in me. Where did you get the IED? How did you figure out how to wire it? Where did you find the space to do all of this? Just tell us a little bit what you can and are willing to share with us, Chris, about some of the logistics.
Yeah. Great questions, by the way. So, this one shot you see, or the video you see that, you'll see on a DEFCON talk that goes for 40 seconds, the amount of effort involved. I mean, there was a three camera crew that were on the ground to get that shot in a steel cage so they didn't get blown up themselves. We had that. If you look at the backdrop, you'll see it's all dry. That's because we're in the Australian I'm not going to say the outback, but we're in the the bush.
Yeah, you got lots of land out there in Australia, right? Yeah.
Lots of land. But at the same token, it was 30. I think it was Fahrenheit, about 100 degrees. So it was a total fireband day. So you obviously can't do fiery stuff on total fireband. So we had to get special permission from the fire brigade to do these sort of explosions, which then required a water tanker. So then we had had to have a water tanker on site to put this stuff out once it blew up. But in terms of the IED stuff, obviously we did not use an IED with like ball bearings in there. That would obviously be stupid.
Sure.
But, so obviously we use things like black powder and stuff like that, and also we put in some special effects, so you can see little sparkles in there.
Yeah,
we put a little bit of sawdust in there, so you get that sparkle effect in there.
But it looks like a Hollywood explosion, is what you're saying. You basically mimic, yeah.
So I filmed it. So I hired a camera crew to film it. Worked with an explosive guy, and then we put that together. And then my kids drove the cars over the pad.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's all. And where did you get the funding for that? Was there someone fund that, or?
Yeah, me. I self-funded.
Wow, that's a lot of funding and experimentation for that.
I think it was about. Don't tell my wife. It was about 150 grand. Yeah, wow. USD on that one.
Wow,
that's amazing. I mean, you have an awesome picture to show for it, right? An awesome story to tell.
Are we testing F-35s next? Are we looking at some drones? Like, where are we showing up for the next iteration? Like, we're gonna have to go bigger. Just saying.
You have to go bigger. I've done killing people, overthrowing governments, and then IEDs. I'm letting that topic stew with me now on where that lives.
I'm good with any of these ideas.
Well, when he first mentioned about doing the near field through the Earth's frequency, the resonance and stuff, actually one of my questions on that was about, isn't that part of what can be used to disrupt trains? And then you happen to mention about blowing up trains later. So I think that's obviously the next thing you got to go to.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I can use that research and push it further. That's for sure. And someone made up the point about, we talked about research, and then you're not getting the credit for the research. The research I've done is an extension of research that was done as early as World War One, where they used bayonets and communicate between trenches. So they would use 2 bayonets in the ground and then a piece of wire, and then communicate messages between trenches and bunkers. So it was that, but more of a scientific level, increased power, better antennas, better, impedance matching and all that sort of stuff. So I took that one step further, and I accredited that, at least in the paper, on where that came from.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, as whatever research that you do, typically, right, there's previous research that you're building upon, right?
Thank God.
Thank God for that, right? We're not starting from zero all the time. It doesn't have to be the exact same research, but there's related work. I love reading research papers. One of the first sections I go to is related works, right? And usually every research paper has that section. And I'm like, if I'm not familiar with those papers or the techniques, I want to go read those first, because I need the background. Otherwise, that question will be plaguing me the entire time I'm reading the research paper, right? So thank God we have these related works.
And in some of those research papers, I'll actually say, we looked at the use of this as a communication method, and we found that 9 kilometers was not long enough to do effective communications. Why, when we have wireless technology and SATCOM and all that stuff, where we can transfer stuff all around the world, which meant that it's useless for that concept, but very useful for the IED setting.
That's amazing.
Because you still need a spotter. Like, you can't trigger an IED unless you can see someone. So someone needs a spot to communicate. To the trigger man.
Yeah. Did it actually detonate?
Yeah.
More questions for Chris?
I mean, it's so rare that we get to talk to somebody who just goes, "Yeah, I do this stuff. It's what I do for a living." And I respect that. And don't get me wrong, I also respect the SIEMonster stuff, because that's really a cool SIEM. And well done on that, by the way. But it's you can talk to the Gruck. Actually, that's a question. How do you feel about what the Gruck does?
So I'm okay with what the Gruck does. Look, the thing is,
wait, hold on. Can we state for the audience and me exactly what the Gruck does?
The Gruck is a digital arms dealer. He will buy 0 days. He will buy those TTPs that Tyler hoards in his back pocket. And you show up in Thailand at a specific bar on a specific time, and he will have a bag of cash for you if you hand over a USB or something with the appropriate code on it that he can check out. I mean, Chris, we're on the same page?
we're definitely on the same page. I don't know what he's doing right now. I've had conversations with him where he said that he doesn't do that now. I won't get that into this conversation here, but what do I think of what he does? Go for it, knock himself out. Everyone's got to make a living. So
Valid. And you know, and then there's the so there's like the Gruck, there's you, there's a few others that are well known. And I thought your characterization of white hats that or black hats that turned into white hats interesting. You know, some of them are real. They don't do that anymore. Most of them it's bullshit. They still practice. They may not get paid for it, but they still practice.
correct. You would not believe the number. When I come out and say that I do this, then boom, everyone comes out of the woodwork and says, you know, they may be a leader of an organization that promotes that, you know, do this but not this, and they do both. Like it's just you know, it's just bullshit.
Interesting. So it's fascinating to me that as soon as you open the door, there's people rushing to get through it, basically. And you're like, yeah, I do this, and then 5 people like, I do that too. You know,
why is it such a nuance in our community? I mean, that's how most of us came up, and let's be real, like before this was a damn job, like this was a hobby, and we were doing this for the sheer curiosity and because we like to break shit. Like, so why did that, or when did that make such a big shift? Was it when we went to corporate land and we had to adopt the consultancy life and fit in to make money at the corporate environment? Or was it later when we had to start making money and selling out to VCs because we needed to support businesses that were coming up too quick? Like, where was the disparity that happened? Like, this is, again, lots of us talk about this, and then it is not a thing in the community, and you end up getting shunned in a lot of groups just because you say you do it.
Yeah, again, another wise question, young man. So the answer is all of the above. I mean, I listened to interviews with Chris Roberts. You guys know Chris Roberts. He's awesome, but he gets a job and then he has to conform. So he has to present a certain way, and that's why I only work for myself, because I don't have to follow that bullshit anymore. So you'll find, and I don't know what's going to, as people get older and they finish the business, they'll probably come back and say, hey, I did X, Y, Z. And then they'll probably come on your show and do X, Y, Z. But yeah, you're right. It's that whole consultancy, conform, VC. Oh my God, if he's doing this sort of work, then he's SIEMonster secure, and all that sort of bullshit mentality that you have to go against. I'm trying to short circuit it, if that makes sense, for everybody else.
I love it. You're hacking the mindset and disparity of what we've now become as a hacker community.
It totally makes sense. And I'm not.
It's embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for our. So with respect, I'm embarrassed for our community that we're going down this way. I mean, the whole disobey. It's like, where did that go? We use it at DEFCON. And then it's like, don't put stickers on the elevator, don't do this and don't do that. For fuck's sake, come on, guys. What we used to do will blow your socks off. So, you know, all of a sudden, we're turning into black hat now. The conference, you know what I mean? Like, Jesus Christ.
I mean,
I hate that we're turned into
a little
that.
while. To be fair, that's why they had to burn down the Rivieras. I mean,
Chris, I agree, and I've said what you're saying probably in a little more politically correct terms. I'm like, let's not lose sight of who we are as hackers, and I think as hackers we've always kind of blurred the lines, gray, if you will, blurred the lines between moral, ethical, legal, illegal, right? But I think a purest sense of the word of hacker in my mind, right, is your intention, right? Your intention is not to harm people. Your intention is to show that people could do these bad things, and here's an example of that, right? And I don't want to lose sight of that, like disobey, like break the rules, right? But the reason you're breaking those rules is often, hopefully, not unethical or immoral.
And it could be just for learning. Like you actually love to hack to learn how things work.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And sometimes bad things do need to happen to bad people. Like,
yes,
I know
not
everybody has a stomach for that, but at the end of the day, there has to be people at the end of spears and pointy ends that do shit to make the world go round. So sorry if that doesn't sit well. The world is how it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but the people at the end of the tip of the spear, typically military people, are directed by authorities to do so. Chris, you're self-directing. They should be civilian authority. That's the whole concept behind it. Chris, you're self-directing, and I'm not bitching at you. Please don't misunderstand. I'm having a discussion. But the idea here is that you're picking and choosing based on your morals, your ethics, your values, your choices. And I don't have a problem with that, but it's going to be seen as immoral because you're imposing your morals on potentially a situation where somebody could get killed.
What you're saying is right. Is 100% right. So you're now then putting rules on me on what I can and can't do, which means I will then bounce back off you because I don't want any rules. I want a clean place of research, good or bad. So if I'm then looked at as immoral, for me that's like water off a duck's back. Like I don't care. It's not.
No, I wasn't saying that, to be clear. I apologize.
And I don't take offense at that. So please don't think this is me like triggering back. It's essentially saying for people like me, it means nothing. You know what I mean? Like there will always be some. As kids, we were told clean your room before you go to bed, eat your Brussels sprouts before you do that. You know, it's constant rules, and I'm trying to essentially ignore any of those sort of rules to continue on with what I see as my mission. But again, there will always people that will say what you're doing is wrong. You should leave this up to the government. If I left it up to the government, you know, we wouldn't have been in Iraq. I mean, it's one of those things. I don't trust my government anyway, so I'm not going to follow what they say.
Right, and to back up what Chris is saying too, I don't want to follow social norms because social norms also told me growing up that I had to wait 30 minutes after I ate to go in the swimming pool, and we all know that is absolute bullshit now. And I want some of my childhood back.
I mean, you add on to that, though, and governments, let's be very clear, like governments need people like Chris and need people because there's so much bureaucracy and they move so slow and there is red tape. They rely on the fact that there are people there are working groups, there are civilian people that handle situations for them because they do not have the capability because of the red tape, the handcuffs, the golden handcuffs, even constraints down to defense contractors, right? Like that gets outsourced and then they offload that into shell corporate. Like there is a lot of smoke and mirrors there that the government can't do all the things that the government does or pretends to do without private and civilian intervention there.
Deniable assets.
And agree. And when did we give a shit about what the government fucking thinks? You know what I mean? Like who the fuck cares what they want? Like I don't give two flying fucks what they want.
No, but it seems like the people who do care what they want are those that really are only able to progress through life whenever it's set on a clear pattern. This is the step you take and this is the step you take. And what I'm hearing what you say and what I think a lot of us like to, and why we become hackers or are drawn into this is because of a natural aptitude for efficiency and not caring. And so you're able to go like, well, no, but I can get the same effect with this and this minimal of this. Why wouldn't I do this? Like that's idiotic to go the other route.
But I think what we're saying is that they're trashing our rights and we should hack the planet. Is that?
I love it.
And my point before was like, you know, the government needs people like me. And that statement is 100%. But I think what I was trying to say is who cares? Like, who cares what they want? They don't even know what they want.
Chris, I just have 5 questions left for you. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I'd love to.
3 words to describe yourself.
I'm a fucking hacker.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
I'd probably have a knife, a blade.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
I'm a fucking hacker.
What's your favorite hacker movie?
I don't have any. They're all shit.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents. Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
I was going to say Claudia Schiffer, but that could be embarrassing.
This is your fantasy, Chris. I'm not. No one's judging you. I mean, at least I'm not judging you.
I'm going to have the Queen as my mum, so there's no funny buggers. So the Queen Elizabeth II. And father will be Abraham Lincoln because I think his hat's pretty cool.
Very nice. Chris, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. Great questions, by the way, guys.
Thank you so much, Chris. The security news is coming up next. Make sure you stay tuned.